Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Stephen King podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Lou Sytsma, and I'm here with Hans.
Hello.
And I hope everybody out there is doing well. As I mentioned, this is episode 66, and we've got the usual Stephen King news, and as well, we're going to be talking about the Charlie the Choo Choo book that was just released, as well as a surprise appearance of a Stephen King short story. And then we're going to have something really special. We're going to talk to Hans about his upcoming new book, 20th anniversary of his website.
Yeah.
So buckle in and let's get the show on the road with the first news item.
Welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room.
Yes, and the first news is about the movie version of Gerald's Game that has now finished shooting on November 14th. It did its last shoot. And well, it's a bit surprising that it finished so quickly.
For sure.
Yeah, but I guess it's much because it's taking place in one scenery, most of it.
Right.
So I guess it doesn't have to have a lot of changes in what's it called, the settings.
The setups.
Yeah, and moving around and stuff like that. They go to one place and they do everything basically in the same location, and so I guess that cuts a lot of the time, calendar time that it takes to do the movie. So, but it's interesting,
yes.
And hopefully that means that it definitely will be out next year, I think.
For sure, yeah. It's really surprising how fast this moved from the time that we first heard about it till the time it wrapped shooting. It felt like just 2 weeks or something like that. So
yeah, they
must have really kept this close to the vest until they decided to start talking about it. So. But I have a feeling this is going to be much of a very handheld, or maybe it's going to be like a very static two-camera kind of setup, and they just sort of filmed it. Or maybe they did a combination of the two, but we'll have to see. But
yep.
It should have that feeling of urgency about it that you don't get when it's a long production. So we'll have to see how it turns out. I'll just, as usual, cross our fingers and hope for the best.
Yeah, and I think that it might be cutting some corners as well, since it's going out on Netflix. It doesn't have to concern itself with the competition in if it was something going to the cinema with
right.
what else is going up that weekend or that weekend. So Netflix can just put it out there when they have it done. So maybe that will also cut the time for it to get released. So hopefully early next year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the running time on this is. If it's going to be like 90 minutes or 2 hours, you would have to think it would be shorter considering how quickly they shot it.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see.
Yep.
All right. So up next, posted on November 23rd at Hans' site, you can read about it there, is Stephen King read some excerpts from Sleeping Beauties. That's his upcoming book with his other son, Owen King. And he did this in front of a Princeton audience. And he did this from the Princeton University's program in creative writing at the MacArthur Theater with Althea Ward, as part of the Althea Ward Clark reading series. He was introduced by Joyce Carol Oates, and he talked about the story, which is a reference to Sleeping Beauties, and talked about writing. And he was also made a joke about the fact that he had pressed the wrong button on his iPad and he had lost all his excerpts. So once again, he was talking about the fact that he still prefers the printed page to his iPad. But it was interesting because he's one of the first writers to do The Plant as a e-story. So unfortunately, at this point, we haven't still seen any video or heard any recordings of what these two excerpts that he read from, which I'm really curious to hear about, because his son Owen has a very different writing style than Joe Hill. in my mind anyhow, from the one book that I've read. So it'll be very interesting to see how this project turns out.
Yeah. Yeah, and we don't know much about this. We know it takes place in the near future, and I think I read something that it was something about if all the women would go to sleep, something like that.
Yeah.
And the two excerpts were one from the male character's view and one from the female character's view. So, but I think that the fact that we haven't seen any videos or heard anything about this is because this wasn't a normal King event.
Right.
I don't think that the audience that were there were all there because they were Stephen King fans. Because we haven't heard anything about this. Basically, there's been 2 newspaper articles about it.
Yeah.
But that's all. So we all know how much. Or how quickly when King does a reading of something new that it ends up online, both in text and in audio or video, stuff like that. But not this time, unfortunately, so we're just going to have to wait.
Yeah, it still is amazing, though, that it's how low-key it is, because Stephen King, whenever he makes a public appearance, he usually gets a lot of coverage. So I'm really surprised that nobody's, or even the university hasn't released any video of this event as well. So
yeah,
we'll just have to keep our eyes peeled.
Yeah, I think the tickets were released to the students at the university first. So I think a lot of university students that maybe aren't King fans but still took the chance when he was there, made it very hard for Stephen King fans not going there getting tickets. So I think that might be one of the reasons.
Yep. Anyhow, we'll keep our ears and eyes open, and hopefully somebody will pop up on the web with some coverage, more detailed coverage of this. But I haven't seen anything as of this date.
No, and hopefully we'll soon get an announcement of when the book will actually be released. We don't have a date yet, except next year. So
yep,
it will be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next news item is a new Stephen King short story. This is a little bit strange if you ask me, because we know that the book Sunlight or in Shadow, stories inspired by the paintings of Edward Hope, is going to be released in December now, and in it a lot of authors have written stories about Edward's paintings, and we know King's was in there. But then last week Playboy actually published his story online. I must admit that I'm a bit surprised, because the sales for this book is probably going to drop a lot now when a lot of people could read Stephen's story online instead of buying the book. So I don't really understand why they released it online so close to the book being released.
Yes, very puzzling.
It can't be good for the publisher, at least, because in all fairness, there are a lot of other authors in the book, so the book is still enjoyable to read. But I mean, a lot of Stephen King fans will buy everything he's in because he is in it. Now they could read it for free, so I imagine that they would lose quite a lot of buyers of the book by doing this.
Yeah,
but
I'm in total agreement with you. I'm totally puzzled as to why this was released the way it was. As you said, outside of the other writers that are in the book, the biggest writer is obviously Stephen King. So to give away his is like the cherry on the top of this collection, and they just gave it away. So it doesn't. Yeah, I don't understand the marketing strategy behind this at all.
No. The only thing I can see is that Playboy paid a lot of dollars for it. So even though they may have lost some buyers of the book, they might get it back, the money back, by selling it to Playboy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I read it, and I think it's a really great story, and it's very interesting when you look at the picture, because I don't know Edward Hooper at all, and I won't pretend to know what he was thinking when he did the painting, but I'm fairly sure he didn't think about what Stephen King is writing in the story when he did it. And I think it's amazing how he can come up with this story by looking at the picture. So I think it's a wonderful story. I like it a lot.
Yes, it's a excellent teaching exercise for anyone who's a budding writer who's ever had to do a writing prompt. You can see how King took this picture and just went with it in a totally Stephen King way. But if it was another writer, I don't think they could have come up with the same story. So
no.
It's pretty amazing. If you take a picture like this, you would get 10 writers, you would get 10 different stories, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And the last item that we're going to talk about is the fact that this is old news for everyone now, but it's one of those things that happened just after we had recorded our previous podcast. So the time gap has been quite a bit. But the Dark Tower movie was moved from its February release date to July 28th. And I'm curious, Hans, what are your reactions to this news?
Well, I can't say I'm surprised, because there are a lot of special effects, or has to be a lot of special effects in the movies, and those things takes time. So I'm not surprised that I thought it was very quickly to have it out in early next year. So I can't say I'm surprised. I'm surprised that they moved it so close to the release date. Actually, I mean, it's just, what is it, 2-3 months? They should have seen this coming a lot earlier, I think, if that is really the reason. There might be other reasons. They might have figured out that a lot of other movies coming out at the same time, so they don't want to fight with that one, or I don't know. I don't really know, but the official word is that it was because they didn't have the time to finish the special effects.
Yeah, to me, this is strictly a financial decision. Well, not strictly, but it's driven by keeping the budget of the movie within the as close as possible to the original $60 million budget that they came up with. Doing special effects, still, what takes the most time is the actual generation of the effects, and that's when movies incur higher costs. So when they want to get those effects done quicker, then they have to pay for more computer time, and usually that means running 24/7, and that's where a lot of the costs go into rendering all these graphics. So obviously they want to keep their costs down, and so they're spreading out the rendering time. I'm just a little disappointed because of the way things have been going with movies in general. You have your certain movie periods, like you have obviously the summer with the summer blockbusters, and then later in the year when you get into the fall and winter, you have your Academy Award release times. And then there's what was traditionally known as the dumping ground times, which was like January and February. People aren't going out to the theaters as much because they've either spent all their free money on Christmas, or the weather's not that great. So, but recently we've seen certain movies, like this year we saw Deadpool, which I think was released in February, become a breakout hit because there was no real competition around it. And next year is just crazy busy. I mean, there's still a couple of movies in February that might generate some money. There's February 10th actually has got like the Lego Batman movie, John Wick Part 2, 50 Shades Darker. Now, fortunately except maybe for John Wick, the Dark Tower movie didn't have a lot of crossover with those other movies, so I don't think it would have been impacted too much. But February 17th, or the back half of February for next year, is not so bad. Now we push the movie out to July, and that's the tail end of the summer blockbuster. I mean, the beginning of July, we start with Spider-Man Homecoming on July 7th, which we know is going to have a big command of the box office. And then the week after that, you've got War for the Planet of the Apes. The week after that, you've got Dunkirk, which is the next Christopher Nolan film. And then you've got July 28th, where the Dark Tower is now, and it's going against a untitled Disney fairy tale movie, which is supposed to be a live action movie, which makes me nervous because Disney has been hitting it out of the park with pretty well everything they've been releasing. Got Beauty and the Beast coming out next year as well, live action version, and people are very excited about that. So moving the Dark Tower into the summer blockbuster period time, I'm just afraid it's going to get a little bit more lost in the shuffle, or the chance for it is to happen. But on the other hand, Sony's Spider-Man is opening that month, so you know that the Dark Tower is going to have a trailer before that movie. So it's going to get a lot of exposure at the beginning of July, which is good. So we'll just have to see how it plays out, and hopefully the trailer knocks it out of the park, and it'll really get people excited to see something different. Which is what the Dark Tower has going for it, and against it is that it's not a known franchise yet at this point. So I'm of mixed minds about it, but I think once we got the news that that special preview wasn't going to happen at the EW event back in October, end of October, something was going on, and plus we hadn't seen any trailers or anything either. So it's not surprising. It's a little disappointing. I think February could have became Dark Tower month. Maybe the next movie will still be released in February if they get that far, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I think it will be interesting to see how much they will promote this one as a Stephen King movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes that might be working negatively for the movie.
Yeah.
Because I mean, a lot of people see when a new Stephen King movie comes out, they see like a B horror movie or something like that, or not very good movie. And I mean, I think wasn't it Shawshank Redemption that didn't have Stephen King's name on it. So I think that in some respect it might even be better if it's not promoted as a Stephen King movie for those who, I mean, for the hardcore fans, we know that it's Stephen King, so we don't need his name on the poster to know it. And for the non-Stephen King fans, I think that in some retrospective it might even be better if it's not mentioned that it is Stephen King movie.
He seems to be on a bit of a resurgence right now, so I'm actually thinking that it will probably be not a bad idea to mention him. But I think more importantly, what they have to emphasize is that this is the beginning of a story that's on the scale of a Lord of the Rings or a Harry Potter series or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the aspect I think they have to push. And I'm still, do we know what the rating for this movie is going to be?
No, I don't think we've heard it.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to be R, but you think they would go for a PG-13. So that's another thing that we don't know, like, because we know that the It movie that's coming out in September is rated R, and I don't think R rating is a bad thing for this movie. We've seen other movies with R ratings like Deadpool that have success being an R-rated movie. So, and this really, I just can't see any way that they can cut this movie to be kid friendly.
No,
like I don't
think it should be either.
No, I don't think it. Yeah, it's a more adult story. So
yeah, I don't think they need to do it. I don't think they should aim it for. I mean, it's like when they did the 4th and 5th and 6th Star Wars movies. They aim for a younger audience, and that was a disaster, I think. So I think they should keep it in a level that's what the movie deserves, and if 7, 8, 9, 10 years old can't see it, then so be it. They can watch it on at home when it's available there, if the parents are okay with it. But I don't think they should aim for a too young audience.
Yeah, no, I just want to be clear. I don't think it needs to be a R-rated movie for it to be successful, because really most of the time movies that get R ratings, it's usually because there's some sort of sexual content, not because of violence and that. So from telling the story from that perspective, but how deep are they going to get it? Because like there's scenes with Roland with one of the demons, sleeping with it to get some information that it's looking for, things like that. But from a violence perspective in that, I don't see an issue. It's just how far are they going to push any of the sexual connotations of the story. But
well, that's no problem here in Sweden.
No,
we are open for everything like that now.
Oh, okay. Well, it's obviously it's a big issue in the States. So, and which is And I think China too now is also a big market, becoming a bigger market actually than North America. So I don't know if those are issues there or not either. But we'll have to see.
Yeah. It's interesting. Here in Sweden, we are more careful to show violence, and in the US, you're more careful to show sexual scenes. So it's quite different.
Yeah, that's the difference between the two continents for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm curious though, like, would you be disappointed if the movie was rated PG-13?
Well, I don't really care what the rating says. It's if the movie is done too much children friendly and too
safe,
right for too safe, just to be able to show it to children, then I think that would be a disappointment.
Right.
I think they need to show some edge in it, and if they can do that and get it rated for children, fine. If they can't, I don't really care about the ratings. I'm more interested in just to do it justice.
Yeah, because like I think of like the Lord of the Rings movies. Those movies are rated PG-13, but there was some pretty hardcore violence in those movies, and I don't think the movies suffered from the fact that they were rated PG-13 at all. So, and I think this Dark Tower series is generally like that, but it does have some sexual content in it that Lord of the Rings didn't. So that
the only benefit of not having too young children see it is that it will be a little more quiet in the cinema. So, and I guess that's a good thing.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah.
I'm just, I don't remember any kids when I saw Deadpool, so I'm hoping that Yeah, that will hold true for the Dark Tower series as well. So that's a good question you might want to throw up on your website to ask people their thoughts on whether are they worried about what kind of rating the movie's going to get. Because unlike the next story that we're going to talk about, I don't really think that this is an appropriate story for kids, and we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that's all I got on this one. You got anything else?
No, that's it.
All right. So stick around, and we're going to get into our first one of our sessions on the Charlie the Choo Choo book, which is we've been kind of having a fun running gag about this. Hans thinks that this book is okay for kids, and I don't. So, but you have the book now, Hans, and what do you think of it?
Well, I definitely think that it's an okay book to read to children. Before we talk more about it, I'm gonna read a tweet that Stephen King tweeted today, where he says, "I just read a charming children's book called Charlie the Choo Choo. You should buy 2 copies, perhaps 5. Only wish I had written it."
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, I think this is a children's book. I don't think that Charlie is so very scary, and I think that one of the reasons that we think that this book is too scary for children is that we have read the Dark Tower books, and I mean we connect him with Blaine in Dark Tower, and Blaine is a scary train, but I don't see Charlie as a very scary train. I mean he's alive, but I mean so are we, and we're not scary. So I think that. I don't think that this is. I think you can read this to your children without any problems. Have you read it? What?
Well, I've obviously read the Dark Tower version of it, but I've seen it.
Yeah, and I can just say that is actually the same book, word for word.
Which is one of the reasons why.
Just the illustrations that's in
which is one of the reasons why I'm not motivated to run out and get it, because I've already read the story. The only thing is, it's more of a collectible thing. So, and it's not something that I get totally fussed about if I don't get it. But if you look at the image gallery that EW has put up, and you read the story and look at there's undercurrent evil thing there. Now maybe it's okay to read to kids, and they won't pick up on these things. But when I look at the illustrations, there's an evil slant to everything. Charlie's smile, it's not a pure smile. It's an evil smile, and obviously some of the images of the kids once they're on the train and that they're not happy looking. So yeah, if you read it, it'll probably go over kids' heads, but I think it works maybe it is the perfect kids book, because it's kind of like a Pixar movie, right? It works on one level for kids, on another level for adults. So I don't know. But when I just look at the pictures, I just go to myself, this is not really a kids book.
But do you think you would feel the same way if you hadn't read the Dark Tower books?
No, I mean, that's impossible to divorce myself from, because that's the experience that I have, right? I just can't see any way to distance myself from that experience. Somebody coming into a cold might be able to, but if the kids are looking at the pictures, I just think subliminally they're going to pick up on these pictures are, and the wording is just a little bit different than a regular story, like what we think of a more traditional kids story. Because kids pick up on those kind of things, and I don't know if it will. Obviously, for most of them, it won't bother them. But, everybody tell stories about their kids that were afraid of anything scary until they got much older. So I guess it's up to the parents to know their children and to know what they think is appropriate for them. But yeah, I just can't get away from my initial impression when I look at when I just look at Charlie's smile. There's something in his eyes. There's just something that gives me the creeps a little bit when I look at it. It's kind of like Pennywise the clown.
Yeah, because exactly when this one was released, when they gave it away at the Comic-Con, I was listening to the third book in the Dark Tower on audio, and when the first photos were from the inside of the book were released, I actually were at that part of the book where Jake reads this one. So I actually followed it word by word and looking at the pictures, and I didn't see it as very scary. I agree with you. Some of the photos surely look a little bit mean in them. I agree to that. But when I listened to it, then I didn't feel that it was a scary book. But then when you continue to listen to the Dark Tower book, and they cross over at the amusement park where they find a train that looks like Charlie that scares them, and then they come to Blaine and everything like that. That gives this story a whole other meaning. So that's why I think that if you hadn't read the Dark Tower books, I don't think you would. You might pick up still that Charlie looks a little bit evil in some of the photos, but I don't think you would pick up that it's a scary book, because I mean it's about a train that's replaced by a modern train, and gets sad about it, and then becomes the hero when the other train won't work and saves the day, and everybody goes off happy basically. So, but it would be interesting to my kids are too old to read this book too. So it would be interesting if anyone out there listening got this book and read it to their children, and it would be interesting to hear what the result was. If there were nightmares, or if they liked it, or thought that it was a crappy story, or whatever. It would be interesting to hear their opinions.
Absolutely. Because I and you might be totally right. Maybe I just can't divorce my experience from reading it in the Dark Tower. But when I just read the story and look at the pictures, there's just something a little off about the whole book that you don't see in other kids' books. Like there's just an undercurrent of evil nastiness there that I just can't not see when I look at that book.
Yeah, but it's written by King, so.
Well, yeah, obviously.
But I must say also that I really like the illustrations in the book.
Yes, I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, they aren't done by Ned Damon, who's done the cover, because the cover is the one that you can find in the Dark Tower 3. So he has actually only done the cover, and the others have been taken or made by some interior illustration Columbia 3-star marketing group. So I don't know if they how they did it, but I think they really capture the spirit of the cover, and
I think so too.
Yeah, but I think that they are great, and I think that I'm not in no way a art. I don't know much about art, and I don't want to insult Ned here, but I think that if you don't know, you could easily think that he had actually done the interior for it as well. Because they keep the same style, they keep the same theme and everything. So it's not something that you think of that, the cover is very different from what's inside the book. It really gives the same feeling all through. So I think they have done a great job with this book, and I definitely think you should buy it for your collection.
Okay. So stocking stuffer for everybody.
Yeah, and I mean it's not that expensive. I think it's, what is it, $15 or something like that. So, and if you ask me, I think it's totally worth it. You can read it if you're not a child, and maybe you get nightmares, but that's just a bonus in that case.
Yeah. Well, I'm not very motivated to get it for myself, but that's, everybody's different. Maybe if I see it for sale, like for $5 or something like that, I might pick it up, but I'm not definitely not rushing out to get it. And I guess what we can agree on is that this story works on more than one level.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But I think that it's funny how they keep saying that it's written by Beryl Evans, and King keeps saying that, if he would write a children's book, this is what he would write and stuff like that. So I think that's very funny because everybody knows, and it's even marketed as Stephen King books. So it's no surprise. But I think it's fun when they do that. It's a little extra.
Yeah, they're definitely having fun with it, which is good.
Yeah.
And I think it just adds to the whole package.
Yeah, I agree.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around, pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift.
Okay, Hearts in Suspension, and this is a rather strange Stephen King book. When it appeared from out of the blue almost, and we didn't know much about it, and at least I didn't think it would be a Stephen King book. I thought it would be a book about the University of Maine, and that some of the students who went there would write essays about how it was to go there in the late 60s. But when it was announced properly, it was very much a Stephen King book, because this book has a long essay by Stephen King. It has his story Hearts in Atlantis, which is It's not a biography story about King's time at the university, but it takes place in that environment and that time frame. So it's somewhat autobiography.
Right.
And it has a couple of King's columns, the garbage truck, in it. And so that is the main thing of the book, and that is definitely Stephen King. But then he has 12 fellow students and friends who also went there during the same time, telling their side of the story. So it's very interesting that the first thing you read is an intro by Jim Bishop, who is the editor of the book. And then you get Stephen King's essay about how he went there, and he talks about how he started his drinking days, how he was arrested because he in the middle of the night when he was driving home from the pub, thought it was a bad thing that they had these orange worksite cones that they place. And he drove over one because he was so drunk. And he thought that, oh, those can't be standing there. So he simply collected them all and stuffed them in his trunk. And when the trunk was full, he went to his student room and left them there. And went out for a second time and collected the last one, and that was when he was arrested. So, but his friends was kind enough to make the first load disappear. So, but he's very open about that, and he talks about using drugs a little bit, and he talks about smoking and the fact that he actually smokes some now also, and not drugs but regular cigarettes, that is. And then we have after that we have all these short essays from all these friends that he had, and some of them are talking about their own experience, but somehow they get them connected to King's, because he's the spine of everything in this story. So this is people who shared rooms with him, or had classes with him, or were his teacher and stuff like that. So he is involved in everything there. So it's almost like people sitting and telling stories of the past, and how they connect and everything like that. So it's an interesting book. It's definitely not a story book. You get the short story Hearts in Atlantis in it, but I mean you can find that in the collection as well. So you don't have to buy this one if that's all you want. But I think it's interesting, and it gives a sense of how it was to go at university at that age and that time, and everything that was going on at that time. So it's an interesting book, I think. I was surprised by it when I read it.
Right. It's kind of like a non-fiction version of Hearts of Atlantis, right?
Yeah, you could definitely say that. And
Yeah.
I think that the strength of it is that even though King he's very good at telling non-fiction stuff as well, because he's a good storyteller. So it doesn't matter if the story he tells is the truth or if it's fiction. But I think that when you get his story first, and then you get the others and how they saw it from their perspective after King has told how he saw it, I think that gives the stories a little bit more dimension and a little bit more depth.
Right.
So that it's the collective thing that from all their stories that makes this a little special, I think.
Right. And do any of the other people that have submitted pieces to this, do they offer any insight or perspective on Stephen King, or are they talking about him at all, or are they just talking about the time period?
No, they mention him.
Right.
What their experience was when they saw him the first time, and I don't remember who exactly it was, but one of the people who shared rooms with him got some of his early stories, and he wanted them to read them, and they read them and gave comments to him, and now they think that I should have kept those stories and
Yeah,
stuff like
so.
that. So yeah, so but he is definitely present in their stories, more in some or less in some, but he's definitely present in all of them.
Okay.
In some way. So yeah.
And was there anything that anybody said that surprised you about their perception of King?
No, I think that what surprised me most was King's own essay, that he was so open with it, with his drinking problems and stuff like that. He has been in the past as well, but I think he's very open here, and he doesn't shy away from telling it how it is. Yeah, and
cool.
I actually got a chance to talk a little bit with Jim Bishop, who was a teacher to King
Right.
when he went there, and I did an interview with him, and I was very surprised because I contacted him, and he said, sure, send me some questions, and I sent him, I think it was about 8 or 10 questions,
Right.
and he said, okay, let me look them over and get back to you. And a few days later he come back to me and said, oh, I put them together in a narrative, a short one. I hope that's okay. And he sent me like 2.5 pages of text were written about it and answered. He's almost written like an essay about it and answered my questions in it. So that was
Wow.
quite interesting, and it's all on my site, so you can check it out.
Cool.
So that was really fun as well.
Great.
So
Great.
and this book is released by the University of Maine Press, and so far they have released the only edition there is, and it's in hardback. And I am hearing numbers like 30,000 copies, so there's not a lot of copies done of it. And I don't know if this is going to be released as some kind of mass market paperback or something like that in the future, but I think that if you're interested in it, you should definitely get it sooner than later. I don't know how it works with University Press, if they do more copies or if they do one printing and when that's over, it's done.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
think
sure
that
either.
maybe since it's Stephen King, there will be a second printing, or maybe Simon & Schuster would buy the rights and release it as a paperback or something like that in the future. But I don't know. I think that if you're interested, you should get it. It might be a little bit more expensive to get it because you have to order it from them. And definitely if you live outside the US, the cost of shipping is actually higher than the book itself. So
Yeah, that's my problem.
yeah, it's an expensive book, but I think that if you want it, I would definitely buy it now, because if you wait and buy it on the secondary market, you will probably have to pay a higher price for it if they don't do any more. So if you want it, get it now. I think I can't promise that it won't be released in a paperback for $7 in the future. But
Yeah.
we don't know anything about that now, at least.
It's just such a sticking point for me that shipping is more than the book. Otherwise, I'd love to get it. I definitely want to read it. Maybe as an alternative that I can recommend to people sometime that's worked for me is to put it in as a suggestion to your local library, for them to get it. And whether you won't be able to own it, but at least you'll be able to have read it. So that's always something to keep in mind, because I'm suggesting that to my library all the time. And 9 times out of 10, they're pretty accommodating. So it's worked out well that way. So that's an alternative to think of.
Yeah, definitely. And you should know that this is, as you said, it's a non-fiction book. So if it's fiction you want, you shouldn't get this one, because you have the story Hearts in Atlantis, but you can get that in the book with the same name in paperback if you just want to read that story, if you haven't done that. But so this is a non-fiction book with essays from a lot of people, so just so you know what you'll be getting.
Yep. Yeah, it's like the non-fiction bookend to Hearts in Atlantis, which is cool.
Yeah. And I think that cover could have been a little bit more exciting. I'm sorry, I just had to say that.
It's a textbook, dude. Get over it.
I know, and this isn't something that they doesn't promote it the same way they promote a regular book, so it doesn't matter in that way, but I think it's a little too plain.
Yeah. Well,
but
that's university publishing for you.
Yeah. I guess we might be happy that they actually have a picture on it, so.
Well, maybe, like you said, maybe they'll sell the rights to Cemetery Dance or somebody, and then we'll get like a Glenn Chadbourne cover for it.
Yeah.
So, moving on to our next item. And this is the surprise item that we were talking about back in the news section, the upcoming shadow or in the shadow stories inspired by the paintings of Edward Hopper. For any of the artistic listeners to this podcast, you might be familiar with that artist's name. I'm not really, but his paintings were collected and used to inspire an anthology collection of short stories, one of which happens to be called The Music Room from Stephen King. And this is an interesting exercise because they take the picture and use it as an inspiration for a short story. And the picture, I guess, just shows the imagination of Stephen King, because when you look at it, there are interesting elements to it, but it's really just a couple, a husband reading a newspaper and the wife sort of tinkling on the piano. And behind them, there's a door. And from this, Mr. King was able to run with a pretty interesting story, right, Hans?
Yeah, really. if you haven't read the story, I think you should go and read it before you listen to this and come back, because it's a little bit the element of surprise. Because if you look at the picture, as you said, it's just a woman playing the piano and a man reading the paper, and you see a door in the background, and that one is playing a big role in the story, because as it turns out, the man and woman are inviting people home to their homes, robbing them, tying them up, and putting them in the closet and letting them starve to death. And that's their way of getting rid of them, which is quite interesting, because there must be a lot of easier way to get rid of someone. Granted, this isn't a messy way to get rid of people, because there won't be any blood and stuff like that, but I mean, you could strangle people or suffocate people or things like that, but they wait. And the subject they have this time when we enter the story is someone that taking its time to die. I think I don't remember if they're on their third or fourth day or something like that. But as I get it, the woman is sitting there by the piano and is ready. If he should start screaming, she will play the piano to hide the scream. And the man is sitting there reading the comics and commenting on them. And I think it's a wonderful story, and it really shows how Stephen King can take just an image and turn it into something so describing. And I mean, we haven't, the story is extremely short. It's, I don't know how many pages, but it's just a few pages long. But still you get like, you know, the man and the woman, and you know what they do and everything like that. So I think it's a brilliant work of Stephen King, showing how imaginative he is and what he can do with just an image. It's amazing, I think.
Yeah, it is. and like you said, it's, again, he just really makes these two characters come to life, and it's so well told from that perspective. And it should be noted that this is taking place during the Depression era, so it's an older piece, or much older time period. So it's people doing desperate things in hard times story. So, and there's also an aspect of the fact that this couple wanted to have children and they couldn't too. That might have twisted their perception of the world a little bit as well. I think it's never explicitly stated, but there's sort of an intimation that the lack of children in their life it's twisted their expectations of and their morals as well. So I really like that aspect of it. So these characters are very complex for such a short story, which we've talked about before. Like in the first chapter of Mr. Mercedes, you get to know all these characters, and then King kills them off, and it's kind of happens here again too, from the perspective of being able to create pretty layered, complicated characters in such a short piece of fiction.
Yeah, and I think it really tickles your imagination, because once you have read this story, it stick with you, I think, and you start to think about it, and you think about who are these people, what do they do, what happened, did this victim they have, did he die eventually, and did they go out for another, and how did it all end? And I mean, it just sparkles your imagination tremendously.
Yeah. Do they ever get caught?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely worth checking out. And the URL that you can find it at is at Hans' site, November 18th article. So check that out.
Yeah, and it's for free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't beat that.
No.
All right. And our final piece for this podcast is, if you visit Hans' site at all, you know he's been posting frequent posts about marking 20th anniversaries events, or just anniversary events that have been posted on his website. And all of this has led to a book, actually Hans' third book that he's releasing, called Shining in the Dark, celebrating 20 years of Lilja's library. And I'm interested to hear from Hans the whole story of how this book came to be, because it's got quite the impressive cast of pieces of fiction from a varied array of artists. So, Hans, why don't you tell us about this book, how it came to be, how you got all these writers to agree to it, and then you can mention, of course, the cherry on the top.
Yeah, well, I wanted to do something to celebrate 20 years of the site. because 20 years is a very long time, and so much has happened during these 20 years. But I thought that I wanted to do something extra, and I got thinking that what could be extra? What could I do to celebrate it? And the idea of trying to get to publish a story from Stephen King was obviously the highlight, and would be really something extra. I set out to do that, and I got in touch with his people and talked about it, and asked if he had something new that wasn't published, which he hadn't at the moment. He didn't have anything new, but he said I could reprint something that he had done earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really feel that I didn't want to post one of the stories that's been released in one of his books already, because I know from my own experience that when that happens, I mean, it's fun, but it's something you have already read, so it's not that special.
Right.
So I took a chance and asked if I could use one story that wasn't published in his own books, and I got the okay to do that. So I was ecstatic, to say the least, to get the okay to do that. And the story is The Blue Air Compressor, and I don't know if you have read it, but it was posted in small paper in the 70s, and then in heavy metal in the 80s, and since then it hasn't been published at all. And this is an interesting story because it's written by a very young Stephen King, and it's also the only story by Stephen King, as far as I know, where he actually talks to the reader. He actually introduced himself as Stephen King and addressed the reader, which is quite interesting. So I think that this was a wonderful story to get the chance to publish.
Mm-hmm.
So once I had that one, I was thinking that how to publish it, and I think that from the beginning I had decided I wanted to do an anthology, because just publishing it on the site would, I mean, it would be so easy for people to just take it and post it on their own sites, and I don't think that would be quite fair, because that's like spreading stuff around, and I think that the story deserved a little bit more.
Right.
So I wanted to do an anthology, and once I had the okay for the Stephen King story, I was able to contact other people who I thought would work good in this anthology, both because when I first started out, I was thinking that I would like to use stories from authors that I liked, authors that Stephen King liked. So that was my base for when I started to look at authors. And I sent out quite a few invitations to people, and some were interested, and some were not interested. Some were interested but didn't really have the time or the story to, because I wanted to, as the same with the Stephen King story, I didn't want to use something that had been used a lot.
Right.
Of the stories, about half of them are totally new, and about half of them have been published before, but in a very limited way and not very recent.
Right.
So that was a goal of mine, that I didn't want something that had been released a year before one of their own books, because then it wouldn't be anything new for the readers.
Right.
So, and I have been working on this for maybe the last year and a half.
Okay.
So it's been long time in the making. But eventually I got a lot of authors that I think are complementing each other very, very, very well. They have done great stories. And one of the other things I really wanted was to get a chance to work with Vincent Chong, because he's done a lot of great work, and I admire his work.
Yes, he has.
Very much. Yeah, and I have one image from him that I really like, and that is for, what's the story of the marriage, the one that was done as a movie.
A Good Marriage?
Yeah, A Good Marriage, where he has a man and a woman standing side by side. I don't know if you have seen it, but it's on his webpage, and I really like the feeling of that one. So I contacted him, and fortunately he had time to do it. So he's done the cover.
Sweet.
Yeah, and he was so very, I mean, he's so talented. We talked about what I wanted for the cover, and
Mm-hmm.
I said to him that I keep seeing someone like half man, half beast with a back turned to the viewer and kind of looking a little bit over his shoulder for the viewer and giving the creeps. And he said, "Well, you have Marv. Why don't we use him?" And sure,
Yeah,
we did. And he actually created the cover out of my short description.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so and it was exactly the cover I imagined to get.
Right.
And I recently posted the back cover as well of the blue air compressor.
Yeah.
And that was also very interesting because I said to him, do you have time to do something for the back cover? Something simple, maybe just a blue air compressor. And he said, "Oh, let me think about it." And like 2 or 3 days after that, he said, "How about this?"
Yeah, and it's gorgeous.
And I mean, yeah, and I mean, what? How could you do that so fast?
Yeah.
So he did it, and he even gave Lilja's library a little logo on
Yep.
it. So I'm extremely happy with that.
Yeah, that must have been quite a blast when you saw that, because it's a pretty gorgeous image, and it evokes a lot of other thoughts because there's a touch of blood in there, and yeah, it's really well done.
And it will all become very clear when you read the story.
Yeah.
And then I was recommended Erin Wells, who's a very talented illustrator, who I hadn't seen much of her previous to this, but I checked her earlier work out and really think it's great work. And she agreed to do the interior illustrations. So she did one illustration for each story that will be in the book.
Oh, sweet.
Black and white.
Nice.
Yeah. So and I think she really captured the story as well when she did her illustrations for it.
Okay.
So,
cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. So I'm going down through the list of contributors to your anthology, and we've already mentioned Blue Air Compressor. Do you have anything to say about The Net by Jack Ketchum and P.D. Cacek?
Yes, well, I don't want to give too much away, but it's a very interesting story, and it's very, very current.
Okay. Oh, so that's okay. That kind of net. Okay.
Yeah, that kind of
Okay.
net. Yeah, exactly.
So, did you have communications with Jack Ketchum and this other? Is it P.D.? I'm not familiar with this. P.D. Cacek.
P.D. Cacek,
Cacek?
I think it's pronounced. Yeah, yeah, I did. I was at first. I talked to Jack about him doing something for the anthology, and at first he was going to do something original for the book, but as time had it, he was busy with other things, so he suggested this one that he wrote to PD.
Okay.
And he sent it to me, and I read it, and I liked it a lot, so I said, "Sure, this is great. Can we use it?"
Right.
And they both agreed to it. So yeah.
Okay. And next up is The Novel of the Holocaust by Stewart Onan. Did you have communications with him as well?
Yes, and Stewart, I've known him since he released Fateful with Stephen King.
Right.
Yeah, he even got me a copy of that book signed by both of them.
Oh, sweet.
So, yeah, so I've communicated with him over the years, on and off. And this is also something that has been published before, but not very often.
Okay.
So he offered it to me, and I read it, and I think that it's a very good and very thinkable story that's always current, I think. So I think it fits very good into the collection.
Okay. Next up, a prior guest of our podcast, often associated with Stephen King, is Bev Vincent, and his story is Aliena.
And this is something that hasn't been published before.
Okay.
And he offered it to me, and I read it, and I really liked it. It's a very special story, and I think that this is definitely something that could, like with many of King's stories, could evolve to something else. This could easily be evolved into a novel, I think.
Oh, cool.
Or a full book.
Okay.
So I won't go into too much in it because I won't really reveal anything about it, but it's a very good story.
Okay. And then we have up next Pigeon and Theresa by Clive Barker.
Yeah. I thought that, I have to go for Clive Barker and see if he's interested in doing something. I didn't speak to him personally. I spoke to his assistant.
Okay.
He didn't have the time to write something new for me, so they offered this story. And I can easily say that this is the most fun story in the book.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. Because That's it's a nice inclusion because Clive Barker is very open that he feels that he owes a lot of his success to Stephen King.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and this is I don't want to give too much away about the story, but it's
No,
very
I'm more
interesting.
interested in your interactions with the people. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you should read the stories, and we can discuss them more once you have read them.
Yeah. So up next is An End of All Things by Brian Keene.
Yes, this was actually the last story to be entered in the anthology.
Okay.
And Brian wrote this straight for this anthology, so
Cool.
this hasn't been published before, and it's a great story.
Awesome.
He's actually read it live to an audience.
Okay.
I think it was last month, something like that.
Okay.
When he did the reading, and he read this one.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been read once live, never more until this.
Never more. Nice.
Yeah. It's a great story.
Yeah.
It's a great story, and I actually love the title, An End to All Things, and
Yeah.
and once I got the title, I thought, man, that's what I should have called the book. But then I thought, End to All Things, maybe that will give the wrong impression because I'm not ready to end the site just yet. But I love the title. It's a great title.
Awesome.
And the story is great. Yeah.
All right. And then next up we have the appropriate titled Cemetery Dance by Richard Chismar.
Yeah, and this is interesting because, as you know, Richard owns the publishing company Cemetery Dance.
Yep.
So it's an interesting title, and the book is of course published by Cemetery Dance, but the story really has nothing to do with the publishing company.
No.
So and this one hasn't been published as well. So
Mm-hmm.
so well, that's interesting.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to get an arc of his Halloween collection, which has like, geez, I don't know, there's like, I think it's 600 pages. So there's a lot of short stories in there, and there's some really good stuff in there. He's a really good writer. I'm surprised he's not better known outside of his magazine.
Yeah.
And another guest that we've had on the podcast, and also another Stephen King expert, is Kevin Quigley, and he's got a story called Drawn to the Flame.
Yeah, and Kevin I've known forever, and I really felt that I wanted to include him in the anthology because I have known him for all the 20 years that I've run the site.
Oh, okay.
We have talked a lot and exchanged stuff over the years and things like that, and he's a great writer, so I really wanted to include him. And he had this story, and it hasn't been published before.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very blessed to have been able to include this one.
Awesome.
in here.
The next one I'm curious about. What's your thoughts on why he was a good fit for this anthology? As a well-known writer, Randy Campbell, and his story is called The Companion.
Exactly, and this isn't a new one. This is something he published earlier, and I know King has spoken well about him, so I thought that it would be interesting to see if he was interested in contributing to it. And I spoke to him, and he was very interested to contribute and sent me this story. I read it and I think it's a great story, so I think that fit very well in with the others. And I think it's great. He's a great writer, and also I think it's really good to have a story by him here.
Okay. Now this next one, I'm guessing you didn't talk to the persons directly.
No, I'm sorry, I couldn't talk to him.
Because if you did, I'd like to know how you did it. It's Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, and curious as to who did you talk to about. Because this is probably a public domain story, is it not? Or did you have to talk to somebody?
No, this one is so old, so it's public domain, so you can use it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, King has written his version of the Telltale Heart in the Old Man's Ticker, and I mean, Edgar Allan Poe is there any horror novelist that he hasn't inspired? So I think that he had it wasn't a brainer to include him in this one. So. I think it speaks for itself. But I think and both the story is good, and it has a connection to King, and Poe is Poe.
Yep.
So I think he had to go into the story.
Okay.
Definitely.
Another person with a Cemetery Dance connection is Brian James Freeman, and his story is called A Mother's Love.
Yes, and this is a story with interesting twist. And you know I love twists. So,
all right.
he sent me this one, and it's also not published before.
Okay.
So it's a great story, and I'm lucky to be able to include it.
Great. And another interesting addition to this anthology is a writer from your country, John Ajvide Lindqvist. I hope I said that properly.
Yeah, almost. John Ajvide Lindqvist.
Ajvide, okay.
Yeah, written Let the Right One In.
And his story's called The Keeper's Companion.
He is kind of the Swedish Stephen King.
Right.
And I was reading a book by him when all this started. So I thought that I have to try and get in touch with him and see if I can persuade him to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So I managed to get in touch with him and told him what my plans were. And he said, "Oh, darn, I've just sent in all my short stories for my own collection that's going to be out next year. So I don't have anything." So I said, "Oh, that's too bad, but if you got to think about anything, or if the inspiration falls on you, I will keep a spot for you if that happens."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Okay," and I didn't dare hope for more.
Right.
And then a couple of weeks passed, and he sent me an email saying that, "Oh, my inspiration is on. I have a story. It will be perfect." So he wrote it and let me use it. So this is this one is definitely written for the anthology.
Oh, cool.
And he wrote it in Swedish, since he is Swedish, and he has there's a lady in Australia that translates his works to English.
Okay.
So the story was sent. I read it in Swedish first, and once we agreed on everything and I was going to use it, we sent it to Australia for translation, and it came back, and the translator had some comments or some questions on which she was a bit uncertain to how to translate them. So we actually had a talk about it, me and John. And I got to be in on the translation a little bit.
Okay, cool.
Giving my 5 cents on it. So that was that was very honoring and very interesting to be part of that work as well. So
cool.
Yeah, it feels
you're going to be turning into an editor.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So that's all the writers, right? There's nobody else?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay, so that's a pretty impressive collection. So a tip of the hat to you. And also you got to write the introduction and the afterword to the book. And how did you find that?
Well, it's hard to summarize 20 years, something you've done for 20 years and still are doing. So, but I tried to do my best to talk a little bit about the site, why I wanted to do the book, how I did the book, and everything like that. So, but it's interesting. It's hard. I'm not a writer myself, unfortunately. So I hope I didn't mess up too much.
All right. Okay. Anything else that you want to talk about the book? I see it's from Cemetery Dance, right?
Yeah.
750 signed and numbered copies.
Yeah. It will be signed by me and artist.
All right.
So it won't be signed by the contributors, the authors.
Okay.
Only the artists and myself.
Okay. And it's going to be a hardcover limited edition, 750 copies?
Yeah.
And this is a one-time printing?
Yeah, as it looks now. We never know what's happening in the future, but as it looks now, yeah.
And it's gone up. Is it available for pre-order now? It looks like it is, right?
Yeah, you can pre-order it, and it will be released in the first quarter of next year.
Okay.
The original plan was obviously to have it released in this year, because this is the year where I celebrate 20 years.
Right.
But since I'm being new at this, I can say that it's been a very interesting experience to just collect everything and talking to authors about their work and
sure,
payments, contracts, and everything like that. And to summarize it takes a hell of a lot longer than you think.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure it does.
And things have been dragging out, and unfortunately we couldn't manage to get it out this year, so it will be out early next year.
Right.
But I think it will be worth waiting for.
Yes, it sounds very impressive, and I definitely hope to be able to get a hold of it myself.
Yeah.
Yes. So
hopefully you can review it here.
Hopefully, yeah, that would be awesome. And is there anything else that you want to mention about the book? Because I just think it's a stellar package. The artwork, both cover, front and back, are great. Like you said, the Marv at the terminal with your website on it is awesome. And then that blue compressor is a fantastic image. I'm looking forward to seeing the illustrations that Aaron has done for it. And
yeah,
it looks like a really fantastic collection of short stories.
Yeah. One thing that I could mention is that if you want to read more about it, you can go to shininginthedarkanthology.com, which is the book's website. that my friend Anders has done. There you can read a little bit about each story and each author and each artist as well who's illustrated it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go there and go to Vincent's page, you can also go from that to his official site. We can also see a lot of sketches of how he did the cover and stuff like that, which is very interesting, I think, to see how he works
Right.
with it. Yeah. So there's a lot of more information if you want to check it out.
All right. So, everybody out there, mark this one down on your calendars or your wish list. And if you've been good this year, maybe Santa will grace you with a pre-order slip or some sort. But
Yeah.
I think it's, and I hope the fans out there, listeners out there, are appreciative of, we don't very often come on and do self-promotion and that. But I actually put this idea forward for Hans and say, you really should come on and talk about this book because I think it's a pretty fantastic project. And so I hope that you all agree and don't mind that I forced Hans to come on the podcast and talk about it for a little bit.
Yeah, and I can honestly say that what's good about this book hasn't been done by me. It's been done by all the authors and artists. I've just collected it in the same place.
Right.
So it's
Okay.
their work. That's good.
Okay. Well, wish you all the success with this project, Hans.
Thanks.
All right. So that is our podcast for this week or month or time period or whatever, however you're listening to it. Maybe you're doing like binge podcast listening, which sometimes I do with other podcasts. And this will probably, we might get one more in. What do you think, Hans? We're going to get another?
Yeah.
It's almost the end of November. We'll probably get one more in mid-December, I would think.
I think so. Yeah.
We're kind of looking at starting off. There was a release of the audio edition of Skeleton Crew this year, and we're going to dole that out like candy and do them one by one because it's different people doing every story. So if you haven't got this new version of the audiobook of Skeleton Crew, I'd definitely recommend checking that out. What else did we have on the plate? I'm kind of drawing a blank at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have anything set for the next podcast, but I'm sure we think about something. We usually have some closure and start up for the next year around this time as well. So maybe we'll take a look about what we can expect from King for the next year.
Yes. We might be doing the Creepshow documentary. We've mentioned that a couple of times. We haven't gotten around to that one yet. So that might be on the plate for our next podcast, but we're not sure. So hopefully that's enough of a tease for you to keep you interested in listening to our next episode. And as usual,
stay scared. No.
But
stay safe.
This is supposed to be the easiest tagline.
Yeah. And we mess it up every time. Oh, well.
All right, there you go. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The end. Bool.
Oh, man.
Boy. We're getting worse with that every time.